Hello, my name is Tara Springett. I'm a Buddhist teacher and a psychotherapist, and today I would like to talk to you about my new book, The Stairway to Heaven, 9 Stages of Consciousness from Unawareness to Full Enlightenment. And you can see it's quite thick, has how many pages? 340, I think. And in this book I would like to describe to you 9 steps of different stages of consciousness through which every person, every child, every adult and also every society has to go from the lowest step of consciousness to the various steps up to the very highest. And these 9 steps of consciousness, they are very clear, describable, and once you understand them, you can really understand why people are behaving in such a different way. You can clearly say, oh, this is somebody from level number 5, this is somebody from level number 4, and they don't get on with each other because their entire worldview, their values, they don't gel. And you can also apply it to whole societies, understanding the political conflicts around that people have, and interpret them with the 9 stages of consciousness. However, in this book I will go mostly into the development of an individual and apply these stages of consciousness to our personal life. And what it does for you is that it will help you to rapidly develop, because once you can determine your own predominant stage of consciousness, which might be number 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, then you can clearly see, okay, I need to do this and this and this, and then I can go higher. And then once we understand which steps they are, then we can advance very, very, very quickly to the highest stages of consciousness. Now, there are always people, spiritual teachers, who say there aren't any stages, you just wake up and there you are. Now, that is true for people who are on stage number 8, and then they go to 9, and then they are, in a way, they have reached enlightenment or the pinnacle of human development. It is not true for somebody who is on the stage number, let's say, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. For these people, there is a clearly a path which is step by step on which we have to develop. And I also want to point out that not everybody, even spiritual teachers, are maybe quite aware of the stages that they have come through, and they might then describe their own development as a sudden awakening, and then it was all clear. Now, when you take some magnifying glasses and a microscope and you look very, very carefully, you can say, even if this development has gone very rapidly, there are still various stages of consciousness which people have to go through. And I will just give you a little overview over these stages of consciousness. The step number 0 I call innocence, and I'm still reading this out here because I might forget little bits and bobs, so please forgive me for that. On the innocence level, what people are in a state of relative passivity. They are not complicated, they are quite simple. And one important factor in this is that they have little motivation, they have very little awareness, and through that lack of awareness they have a elusive feeling of being in harmony. And even though they're not really in harmony, they just have very little awareness. And they also experience a sort of innocent pleasure and trust. And the main sentence or statement that somebody would say who is on that level is, I belong to my group and that's all I need and everything's good. And we can imagine that this is a very childlike state, really, and it is very appropriate for children. But if we want to develop spiritually or personally, we need to go further than that. And then in the next step, which I call dominance, we go right to the other side from a state of relative passivity. People go then into the other side and become very willful, very domineering, and in part of also very ruthless, and that's where we can find criminals and people who do, you know, greedy and bad things and are very impulsive and cannot somehow stop themselves. So they're stuck on the dominance stage, which is step number 1. And then when people get a grip on themselves, when they become good, so to speak, they go one step further, which is called the obedience stage. And here people make a real effort to apply you know, rules of social behavior which are for the highest good of their community, and try to adhere to them and not just be ruthless and greedy themselves. And here people are submitting their own desires for the higher good of the group, of the community, and with that there's a lot of self-denial, but also judging of others, and the individual would say as a main sentence, I do what is expected of me. So that's people who are very traditional values, trying to do the right thing, to do good. And the central sentence of the stage beforehand, the dominant stage, would be I want, and I want it now, which of course is very egotistical. And so we can see that the obedience stage, it can only come after the dominant stage. You know, we cannot jump over any of these stages. You can only try to submit to higher moral rules after you experienced the negative repercussions of not doing it, because otherwise you wouldn't have the motivation. So the next step, step number 3, is called ambition. And here people adopt a very rational worldview, very thinking clearly, scientifically. They often throw away all religious ideas, God is dead, and it is all about creating a successful self-image. People are often very materialistic, they're very competitive, and the individual says as their central statement, I want to achieve more than anyone else. So you probably recognize that a lot of people in our society are at that stage, is the kind of predominant stage of our times here in the Western world. And then the next step up is called sharing, and here people are fed up with all the materialism and consumerism, and they start a search for compassionate relationships and a more inward-looking exploration of their own emotions, of their own vulnerabilities. They have a worldview which is very egalitarian, so everybody should be the same, nobody should kind of dominate anybody else. And a very central theme of that stage is to live in harmony with nature and in very close relationships. And the individual says as their central statement, I'm close to others and to nature. Now, a lot of people who have read my book have said it came as a surprise to them that there were even more stages above this stage. They thought that was the highest stage, but there are actually 4 more stages to go. And the next one is called responsibility. In this stage, people are quite radical in that they take really full responsibility for everything that's happened to them, even for things where we say normally that's not your fault. You know, for example, having a severe disease or being victimized in some sort of criminal act or something. People take responsibility for everything. And that actually doing that is very, very empowering, because people stop feeling like victims. And in the sharing stage, the one before, people often feel as victim of greedy materialistic society, but at the responsibility stage people don't. They take responsibility for everything, and so that often goes together with the belief in a higher order in the universe, where everything is in a way as it should. And these people usually have a very keen interest in personal development, in following their own vocations for the best of humankind. And the central statement is, I realize my dreams for the best of humankind. Now, one step up from that I call love, and then this stage is where people make the development of altruistic love and spiritual development, that's the central focus of people's lives. So here we enter the realm of yogis and yoginis, of saints, of people who are totally dedicated to their spiritual quest. And the individual says as their central statement, I send love to heal the world. And then the next step up is called bliss, and here people get access to their own divine nature, to their Buddha nature, and they experience themselves as a blissful, loving space, and that often comes with development of supernatural powers. And people often withdraw into spiritual retreats, and the central statement is my true nature is spiritual bliss. And then at that stage, various people, and there's quite a number of people who believe they are enlightened at that stage, but it isn't quite enlightenment yet, because the very last stage, the final stage, is called enlightenment, and this is where people really merge with another divine being. And it is this merging process with a fully enlightened being that only enables us to reach the very, very, very highest top. And this stage, in this stage, the person says as their central statement, I am love. And it is a stage which is signified by infinite love, bliss, wisdom, seeing oneself divine and the world as a paradise. And so these higher stages of consciousness, they are in accordance with Tibetan Buddhism, but also with Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and also with a lot of medieval Christian saints, as they've been described in the book by Evelyn Underhill in her book Mysticism. So it is something that has been described in the world literature in various bits and bobs. The lower stages are more described in psychological literature, the higher stages are more in the spiritual literature. And what I've done is really bringing all these different strands of understanding together and describing them in one cohesive, coherent model, which I call the Stairway to Heaven. And I have ordered the book into various chapters, and in the first few chapters I describe the stages, but then I go through different topics, how these stages can be applied to different aspects of our lives. And the first topic is key motivation, so you can really see where people are on the stairway to consciousness by asking them a simple question, and that is, what do you want more than anything in life? I mean, most people find that difficult to answer anyway, which is a certain indication already, but if they can tell you, you can then clearly see where they are on the stages of consciousness. And then I describe how the different stages of consciousness alter our sense of self, what we believe, what a human being is, what we are, how that radically changes our own view as we are on different stages of consciousness. The same is true what we experience as the outside world, that people have totally different ideas of what all this out there is, and for some it's a fixed fixture that they cannot influence. For others it's given to them by God. For the next person it is quantum physics, something interesting like that, and yet for others it is a kind of dream, something that they've created themselves. So there is huge differences how people experience what we call the world. And then I apply the stages of consciousness to religious views, to spiritual beliefs, to relationships like in marriage, and to how people live their sexuality, how people apply to work, career, how their relationship is to money, and how they parent their children, how the children themselves go through these different stages as they grow up. And then most importantly is that I also clearly explain how we can get from one stage to the other and what is necessary. And there's a whole chapter of giving the appropriate spiritual and psychological exercises to help us to go up these stages, and so that we can develop as fast as possible. So I hope I've whetted your appetite, the link to the book is down here, but it will guide you to my website where you can download the book. But the book is also available as hard copies or e-books from the Amazon sites or from bookshops. You can order it everywhere. And well, if you like the video, please share it, please like it. And you can also subscribe to my channel up here, and thank you for listening. Bye bye.